All right. All right. Hey, Patrick. I see you're here today. How's my audio coming through for you? Can you hear me okay? Awesome. I see we have a few people from ShellHacks as well. Appreciate you jumping in. And we'll probably get started as some more people join. So I'll give it a little time to see if anybody jumps in. And I know this will be recorded for later as well. So I'm excited just to get that shared with as many people as possible because we really love this concept and this idea coming to life. All right, I see a few more people jumping in. Everybody, welcome. I'm just giving it a few minutes now before we get started. That way we can make sure as many people join as possible that want to view and we don't kind of jumpstart that presentation too fast here. Let's see. All right. So we'll probably get started at about 5 after, just to give a chance for a few more people to join. But very excited to share this concept with everyone. It's been quite fun to work on, and I think it'll be an exciting foray into blockchain technology if that's something that you haven't jumped into before. And if it's something you're familiar with, it's got some twists and turns that'll be pretty exciting as well. Awesome. Thank you for the welcome. Yeah, and I've had a few people reach out to me already, and we've kind of talked a little bit about programming in Clarity, which is the language used for smart contracts, as well as some of the libraries that are available to interact with the Stacks blockchain, and a lot of that we'll get into as part of the presentation as well. All right, while we're giving it a few more minutes, I am going to test out my screen share here and make sure everything's working like we expect. There we go. You can see the desktop, perfect. And let's go ahead and bring up the presentation as well. All right. Amazing. So thank you to everybody who has joined so far. I'll be getting started here in just a few minutes, and we'll do basically an overview of what CityCoins are, a little bit about the Stacks blockchain that they're built on top of, give you some examples of what's been created already and some of the ideas we've had around the utility of this particular CityCoin, Miami Coin, which you can see on the screen here, as well as get into some of the libraries that are available for working with these type of things on Stacks. So lots of fun stuff to talk about today. All right. So I think we're at a pretty good amount of people in here. So welcome everybody. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to run this presentation, and I won't be able to see the hop-in screen while I'm doing it. But I did plan to leave some time at the end for Q&A. And we'll, as soon as I get through the entire presentation, then we can get a little more interactive and talk a little bit about any questions you have, or you know, just dig deeper into any of the concepts if there's something there that interests you. All right, so that first 5 minutes has passed. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the presentation. Again, Q&A will be at the end, and we'll just kind of do an overview of everything we have going on. And looking forward to just sharing this concept with everybody. So let me go ahead and pull up the presentation. All right. So CityCoins, this idea of redefining civic engagement. It's really a fascinating concept. It dives into blockchain technology, specifically on the Stacks blockchain. And let's talk a little bit about what CityCoins are, because that's going to be the basis of what we're talking about here. So CityCoins are a way for communities to give power to improve their cities while providing crypto rewards to individual contributors and governments alike. Miami Coin is the first city coin to market. It launched about 50 days ago, and it was built to support the Magic City while rewarding its holders through the Stacks protocol. And what we're going to do today is we're going to dig a little more into the Stacks blockchain and what makes this possible, as well as the different mechanics of the CityCoins protocol and what we've implemented and how it's working today. But just to get things started, let's talk a little bit about why this matters. And since launching about 50 days ago, I think it's 53 total as of today, there were 20 independent wallets that activated the contract, and miners have raised over $6.7 million for the city of Miami so far. Now, I say so far because mining continues today, and mining is the main engine that creates funds for the city. And we'll dig a little more into that and how it works as we go along, but really fascinated at the success here and the overwhelming support that we've had from various community around the world. One of the cool things about CityCoins in general is that anybody can go out and be a part of Miami Coin. Instead of having this idea of think globally and act locally, it really expands that horizon to thinking globally and acting globally. One of the cool things about this as well is that the City of Miami Commission, or the Miami City Commission, has already voted unanimously to accept the protocol contribution. So we've definitely made some big efforts and some big successes in getting this started and getting this idea off the ground. The initial focus is going to be here on Miami and making it as successful as possible. And eventually, we hope to apply this concept to other cities, which gives you some unique abilities to interact with the protocol that are not available today. So let's talk a little bit about how CityCoins are used. Now, with any CityCoin as part of the protocol, or starting with Miami Coin, there is no pre-mine or ICO. So the token itself only comes into existence through mining. Now you can mine it, as mentioned. You can also hold it, you can transfer it, you can stack it to earn stacks, and we'll talk a little more about stacking and what that means later on. And you can program it. So some of the examples here include lending, borrowing, payments, access control. There's a whole ton of features that can really be developed on top of this. And it's really up to your imagination to decide what could be created and then to do that within the blockchain and within what's possible. So before we get too deep into what CityCoins are, let's kind of take a step back to the basics. Now, everything here that we're talking about, the Stacks blockchain, the CityCoins protocol, it's all built on open source software. And that's something that I take close to heart. I love open source projects, and I think there's a lot of potential in working out in the open. It's been kind of a trending thing lately to learn in public, and I absolutely love that idea. So CityCoins give us a way for developers to create new applications and experiment with innovative use cases. Now, before we get too deep into it, let's talk a little bit about what the Stacks blockchain is. So if you're brand new to blockchain technology, some of this may go a little more in depth than you expect. But if you've worked with anything related to blockchain before, or if you have any curiosities, there is an amazing community behind Stacks and behind CityCoins both that provides a very good community to work with. I absolutely love everybody I've interacted with. I've had the chance to actually meet some of these people in person, and there's so many cool things going on. So starting with Stacks. Stacks is a blockchain in its own right, a layer 1 blockchain separate from Bitcoin, but it connects to Bitcoin, which enables you to build apps, smart contracts, and digital assets that are integrated with Bitcoin's security, capital, and network. This is huge because Bitcoin in itself has a limited scripting language, and there's only so much that's possible with the Bitcoin blockchain. What Stacks does is it brings this new layer on top that provides common smart contract functionality like we might see on other networks like Ethereum or Cardano or similar, but everything comes back to Bitcoin. And we love that connection, and we love the fact that everything settles on and is secured by Bitcoin. In the beginning, we looked at the CityCoins protocol, and it operates on the Stacks blockchain, and it uses the same consensus mechanism as Stacks, which we call proof of transfer. So if you've been in the blockchain space, or if you've seen other chains, you've seen things like proof of work, which Bitcoin uses. There's proof of stake. But what Stacks brings to the table is something called proof of transfer. And this idea is that miners are recycling the proof of work that exists in Bitcoin. And whenever a miner goes to create a new Stacks block, they are actually spending Bitcoin. And the winner of that block, the person who assembles the next one, gets to mint brand new Stacks tokens. And what we loved about this concept, we wanted to take and apply to CityCoins. So the goal was to enable the same open membership mining and the same token creation logic that we see in Stacks for tokens that are specifically created for cities and provide a unique benefit. So some things to note about the CityCoins protocol. First off, every new token adheres to a standard that we call CIP 010 or CIP 10. Now, if you've worked in Ethereum at all, there's a standard called ERC20 for fungible tokens. And this is the same exact thing, but implemented on the Stacks blockchain. So the same idea that every token does follow a standard, and this allows for easy integration into apps and other things that come up in the ecosystem. Another core piece of the protocol is that it requires 20 independent wallets to signal activation. So even after the code is pushed up to the blockchain, the contract comes into existence, there is still the extra required step that individuals signal that they want this to happen. And we thought that was a very important point towards the decentralization and making sure that it's not just one entity that's saying this should exist, but rather a community coming together. Now, the mining of any CityCoin does happen one-to-one with every Stacks block, which is very similar to how the mining of Stacks blocks comes one-to-one with Bitcoin. And there's an operation called stacking that happens every 2,100 Stacks blocks, or what we call a reward cycle. Now, why use Stacks? And why focus so much on this blockchain in particular? Now, Stacks is secured by Bitcoin. It's an open source network of decentralized apps and smart contracts that are all built on and settle on Bitcoin at the end of the day. It unleashes Bitcoin's full potential as a programmable base layer, and there are already some amazing projects coming to life in this ecosystem. The Stacks 2.0 mainnet launched in January of this year, and the CityCoins protocol launched Miami Coin about 50 days ago. So things are still pretty brand new, but there's already so much coming together, and I'm excited to share some of that with you later as well. One of the other advantages to working with Stacks is the language called Clarity. Clarity was co-developed by Blockstack, which is now the Stacks blockchain, and a company called Hero, which focuses on developer tools for the Stacks blockchain, as well as developed alongside Algorand. So there was a lot of work that went into creating this language, and it came from some PhDs at Princeton who are very, very knowledgeable and have come up with something pretty cool. So what separates Clarity from other programming languages that we see for smart contracts is that it's predictable, it's secure, and there is no compiler. So predictable is in how the language is formatted. It has a very simple syntax that allows developers to know exactly what they're working with and what the code is going to do. It's secure because there's actually a second layer of conditions that can be specified by users. We call them post conditions that allow you to control exactly how a contract interacts with your wallet. So let's say I call a function and I say, I only want this to move 10 units or 10 stacks. Then if the contract tries to do anything else, that contract call will fail. So it's definitely designed with nuclear grade security in mind, which is something we really need when we're talking about smart contracts that handle very sensitive functions or large amounts of funds. Finally, the fact that there's no compiler. Every contract written in Clarity are broadcasted on the blockchain exactly as they are written. You can see the source code for a deployed contract live and right there on the blockchain. And as contracts call other contracts, or there's any kind of interaction there, it is all very easy to follow the call graph and see what's going on. And I like that a lot. When you compare it to Solidity, for example, what you see on the actual network is compiled code. And it's really hard to know what a function does until you call that function. And Clarity just flips that on its head and makes it possible to see what it's going to do before you even work with it. Another nice thing about Clarity is clear code. And you can see a little bit of an example, just a basic counter here on the left. And what I love about this is the Lisp-like language. It takes a little while to get used to the parentheses, but the style of programming here makes it much more safe, secure, and predictable. So there's a lot of potential in how this is put together, and I have to say, like, after working with it, for this protocol, and after working with the community and building this, it has been an absolute pleasure to jump in and to learn more using Clarity for creating smart contracts. So with that in mind and a little bit of that background, let's talk a little bit about CityCoins as a protocol. So right now, Miami Coin is the first CityCoin in existence, but we do plan to launch future cities, and we do want to see further growth in this idea. So there's some key points that the protocol follows in order to make sure there's a consistent experience across all applications and things that interact with these CityCoins in particular. Now, some of this I covered earlier, but just to hit these points home. CityCoins are a fungible token on the Stacks blockchain. They adhere to a set standard for fungible tokens, and there's only one token contract that's deployed per city. There's no pre-mine, no ICO, and they only come into existence through mining. Finally, because of this, CityCoins can interact with both centralized and decentralized exchanges. And one of the things we're proud of is Miami Coin is actually already listed on OKCoin, and other projects are coming online to give the ability to move these around and to do more utility with the token itself. Now, one thing to note is how many CityCoins exist, or how these come into existence. And as soon as everything is activated and mining begins, then the current stacks block is recorded in the contract, and there's an issuance schedule. So the way this works is when miners are interacting with the protocol, the first 10,000 blocks, there's a bonus reward to incentivize miners, followed by a halving every 4 years. That happens very similar to stacks and very similar to Bitcoin, until there's a small amount of CityCoins that are created indefinitely. And the reasoning behind this, and the reason there's no supply cap, is to continue to allow mining to be the main engine that generates funds for the city. And we'll get into that in a little more detail as well. But first, I want to talk about registration. I got into this a little earlier as well, but mining cannot begin until 20 unique wallets submit a transaction to register. And then once that threshold is reached, there's a 150 block, which is about a 24-hour countdown that begins, after which mining and stacking become available. So let's talk a little bit about mining and stacking and what this means as far as the CityCoins protocol. So in order to mine a CityCoin, miners compete by sending stacks in a given block, and a block winner is selected by a verifiable random function that's weighted by their contributions against the total. So what that means is if there's two people competing, for example, and one person sends 30 stacks and one person sends 60 stacks, then the first person is going to have a lower chance than the top paying person to win, but it is still random. So spending more does not mean you're going to win more. And it creates a somewhat fair environment for people to be able to interact with mining and for creating new CityCoins. Also, a few things to note about mining itself is once stacks is sent to the contract as part of this mining process, it is not returned. Instead, it is distributed. And the way it's distributed is 30% of the amount spent by miners is sent to a designated reserved wallet for the city, and 70% is sent back to stackers in the protocol. So of that 30% that miners are spending is how we see the $6.7 million plus that is already accrued in the city's wallet. There's only one winner per block, and users have the option to mine for single or multiple blocks, and the winner cannot claim until 100 blocks pass. Now, that last point is kind of key because it protects the verifiable random function's seed from being known ahead of time. So there's no way to know who the winner is until a set amount of time passes. And 100 blocks in this case is about 16 hours. The next part of the protocol is stacking. So stacking is something that exists on the Stacks blockchain today. Stackers can lock up their stacks and receive a portion of, or actually receive a portion of the amount of Bitcoin spent by miners. Now we mimic this exact structure and the same thing happens. So what you can do is you can take your Miami coin, you can lock it up for what we call reward cycles, which last about 2,100 blocks, or about the equivalent of 2 weeks. And in doing that, you receive a portion of the stacks sent by miners. So in this case, it's a little different than the Stacks network, because in that case, the Bitcoin goes back to the stackers 100%. But in our case, 30% goes to that reserved wallet and 70% comes back to the stackers. So this means by holding Miami coin and by stacking it, you can earn stacks. And a few more details, just the technical side of stacking. Every time you stack Miami coin, you're stacking for the next cycle. Any of the Miami coin are transferred to the contract, and they can be reclaimed after the number of selected reward cycles have passed. Stacks rewards can be claimed after each cycle, And you do have the ability to stack multiple times for multiple cycles. So you can add more to your balance for a future cycle. You can do some for a short amount of time, some for a long amount of time. All of that's included in how the protocol operates. Now let's talk a little bit about the smart contracts that make this possible. There's some key contracts that are currently deployed to mainnet, some of which envelope the core protocol, and some of which envelope Miami Coin in particular. So for the CityCoin core protocol, there are two traits that define what a core contract and what a token contract is, as well as the VRF, or verifiable random function. These three will be used by all future CityCoins, but then there's an individual set of contracts that come online to enable a specific CityCoin. So you have the auth, the core, and the token for each one. In addition to that, user interfaces can be easily built on top of this, and I just wanted to highlight the two that have come up for Miami Coin in particular. So this one comes from minemiamicoin.com, and it actually came from an independent group of developers in the Stacks ecosystem, the Civita Guild. And secondly, there's one here that we created and sort of built alongside the other one. Both have access to the same exact functions, but give you two different views and two different ways to interact. So there's a lot you can do to build a user interface to interact with something like this. And these two interfaces are focused specifically on mining and stacking. However, there are ability to build user interfaces that interact with the token in different ways. And we'll get into some examples of what's been built already. And we're also excited to see what comes out of being a part of ShellHacks here. So both user interfaces are open source, just like the code that you see for the contracts and just like everything for the Stacks blockchain. Some of the technology that's behind them includes the Hero web wallet, which is a Firefox and Chrome extension that allows you to interact with your account on the blockchain. There are two packages as well called Stacks Connect and Stacks.js that give you a whole bunch of abilities to work with these wallets, to generate transactions, and we'll get into that into a little detail a little more detail towards the end as well. Another cool thing that comes along with creating these contracts is the idea of testing and code coverage. So when we're programming smart contracts, we want to make sure that they can do everything that we want them to do and that there are no unexpected outcomes. So in particular, there's a tool that comes from Hero, and they created this tool called Clarinet. And when using it, you're actually using Clarinet and Dino, and you can simulate typical tests that are written in JavaScript to make sure your contracts are operating the way you expect them to. So you can see the example of a mine tokens test here that would make sure that someone is not able to mine before the contract is activated. And this helps really map out the different logic flows in different ways in a familiar way, just to be able to see that everything's doing what it's supposed to do. And we focused heavily on this during the development of the protocol. So I'm very happy to say that we had over 160 tests that run and over 95% code coverage. And we would have been at 100%, but some of that verifiable random function just wasn't 100% testable in the given environment. And in addition to being able to look at your code coverage and to be able to do testing, you can also see the costs. So when you're working with a blockchain, there's only so much space that fits into every block. So you have 2 megabytes of space per block, and you have to try and fit all of those transactions in there. But all of those transactions do come with a cost. So what this tool allows you to do is to be able to see, when you create different functions, what those costs are going to be and how that's going to interact with the blockchain. Moving on to something that's a little more fun than just digging into the code there is some of the utility and the use cases around CityCoins. Now, CityCoins are programmable. And what this means is that smart contracts can be developed around any of the CityCoins tokens, including Miami Coin. And some of the ideas that have come up so far would be like a proof of HODL login, for example, for digital or physical spaces. So imagine that you had to have a certain balance of Miami Coin to be able to access something. There could also be discount programs or payment methods that accept this new type of token. There can be sponsored transactions that accept Miami Coin to pay for the fees of smart contracts. And there's other ideas like automated stacking, over-collateralized loans. Really, the possibilities are endless. And two projects that I wanted to highlight that have come up recently are pretty cool. One is Miami Voice. So the idea here is let's create a DAO in which people can make proposals for different ways that the city can use the funds. And one thing to note in relation to this is the funds that are generated for the city, the protocol itself does not dictate how those funds are going to be used. Instead, it's creating a relationship. And what you have now is a kind of a new paradigm of working with government, where originally you could vote with your ballot, which means you elect someone and you hope they're going to do the things they say they're going to do. You could vote with your feet. If you don't like what a city is doing, then you have the option to move away and start over new. But those two in particular are a little bit disconnected because especially trying to vote with your feet, you can imagine that if you have a family or anything else, it can be difficult to move around. But this third relationship that CityCoins help create is a market relationship to where if you like what the city is doing and you're bullish on the city of Miami, for example, that may inspire you to buy, to hold, or to mine tokens. If you're not happy with what they're doing, then you always have the option to exit your position. So this DAO in particular is a layer on top of that says, hey, what if they were to get together to make these proposals, and the only way that you could vote on the proposals would be to be a Miami Coin holder. Another cool project that came up, and I love this shot, by the way, the guy's desk, is creating an actual physical access control that's linked to Miami Coin. So the idea here would be a small Raspberry Pi that gives you the chance to authenticate and say, hey, I hold Miami tokens. And because of that, I can gain access to a door lock and be able to access a space. So you can imagine this for co-working locations or rentals or all sorts of neat ideas that can come up out of this basic idea. So let's talk a little bit about the tools and resources that enable us to be able to develop these kind of ideas and the things on top of the Stacks blockchain and on top of the CityCoins protocol. The first one is the Hero web wallet. This is a browser extension that allows you to securely manage stacks, as well as your Miami Coin or any other tokens created on the network. And it also allows you to connect to Stacks apps using your digital assets and your identity. So one of the unique things about Stacks in particular is the same public-private key pair that's used to secure your funds is also used to identify you on the network. In addition to that, there's a package called Stacks Connect. So this JavaScript library is for applications that are built on Stacks and helps you interact with the Hero web wallet. So what you can see in this slide here on the left is an example of a function call. This would be what pops up when you go to mine tokens in Miami Coin. And it has some conditions kind of laid out. It says the post conditions that we mentioned earlier. In this case, it wouldn't transfer more than 1 stacks. And it shows the functions, the arguments, the contract I'm calling, fees, network I'm connected to, all the basic information required to be able to interact with these different smart contracts. There's also a library called stacks.js, and this is a big repository of things very similar to the Web3 library if you've seen that before, but it provides everything you need to work with the Stacks blockchain. So you have authentication, you have user profiles, you have decentralized storage via Gaia, and Gaia is actually a fun aside to talk about there as well, because that allows you to do encrypted data storage per user. So it still can use like Amazon AWS or Google Cloud or something like that on the back end, but all of the data that's stored in what we call a Gaia bucket is encrypted by the same public-private key pair that you use to access your funds and to manage your identity. There are also libraries in there that allow you to generate transactions, work with keychains, and much more. Finally, there's an excellent API available that gives you a whole ton of information about accounts, balances, contracts, pretty much anything you can think of on the blockchain. It's a straightforward way to be able to interact and to see different things from, transaction details, account balances, pretty much any of the information that you need to grab can be done through this API. So overall, that is pretty much all I have to share as far as the CityCoins protocol, and I really just wanted to give some time to open things up to questions. So if anybody has anything that they would like to dive into, I think that's the direction we should head next. I'll look through the chat here. Bear with me as I look around my webcam here. All right, thanks, Patrick, for answering questions. Let's see. All right, I see one of the mentors here saying there's a few student groups already working on this, and I'm excited too. I can't wait to see what people build as far as this goes. All right, so I don't see anything else that we need to cover in the Q&A, but I do see someone pending here to come on screen with me, so let me bring you on. And it looks like me hitting the plus button made the name disappear. So sorry if I missed you on that, but no problem. If anybody wants to come on, we can chat live on here. I can also look through the chat or any of the Q&A, and I'm very happy to answer questions as they come up. One that I see in the chat now is only one CityCoin per metro area allowed, or can say Fort Lauderdale or Miami Beach request a coin. Well, one of the beautiful things about this protocol is it's being designed in a way that communities can launch, or the community around CityCoins can choose what cities will be launched next. We do have a video on YouTube that describes a little bit of the strategy here in the beginning. Given this is a brand new concept, one of the core things that we want to focus on now is the success of Miami and Miami Coin, and part of that is bringing in utility. So that's why we're here at ShellHacks, and that's why we're always looking for new ideas that people can do. On top of that, future cities, any other ideas like this can expand in a very fast fashion. But I do see that the kind of first base, second base, third base view of things. First base was getting Miami Coin to where we are now and focusing on its success. Second base will be finding other world-class cities that are tech innovation hubs and that can really support an idea like this. And then third base would be making it so that the community could literally launch any city possible and working towards that. So right now we're working towards that second base phase. And we do have some ideas, and we do have a separate chat. There's a Discord server for CityCoins and a Discord server for Stacks both. And I definitely encourage you, if you're really into this idea and you want to learn more, that's some of the best places to go. And we do have some extensive documentation online as well, and that lives at docs.citycoins.co. I'll type some of those links in the chat while we're talking about it. All right, looks like we have a new one in the Q&A. All right, how does CityCoins decide what cities to partner with? Perfect, so I think I covered that a little bit, but just to reiterate a little bit of that information is really this is a community effort. So when we say what does CityCoins do, or what are the operations of CityCoins, it's a decentralized community. And we're all working together to make some of these successes happen. So with future cities, we do have some open discussions about which ones will be best. And we're hoping to move forward again with those world-class cities that can be on the same level as or close to on par with Miami. Next question that I see comes from Jorge. From the policy admin perspective, what the process was like with City of Miami? What were some of the challenges and lessons learned from the policy administrative side? So one of the cool things about this protocol in particular is that it's not designed in a way that it has to be approved before it can go live. A city could launch before you have full-on government support, But you definitely want to have those open conversations and being able to help educate and teach a city how this could bring them benefit. Once mining goes live and once the registration process is complete, the token comes into existence and the wallet balance begins to grow for the city. And after that balance starts to grow, you can see sort of a fiduciary responsibility to claim those funds and to start using them. All right, so next question I see, can you explain why is stacking a thing and what is the purpose of stacking? Definitely. So there's kind of two elements to answering this question, and we'll start with why it exists on the Stacks blockchain. So when you look at the different consensus mechanisms that exist today for blockchains, like proof of work, proof of stake, Stacks introduces something new called proof of transfer. And the precursor to that would have been this idea of proof of burn. So when miners are spending Bitcoin in order to mint or in order to create new stacks blocks and to mint new stacks, the original method would have been to burn that Bitcoin and you receive the stacks in return. But what proof of transfer does is it takes that a level further and says that if you are someone on the network who is willing to lock up your stacks, then you can receive a portion of the Bitcoin sent by miners. And the reason that is such a cool thing is that by locking up your tokens, what you're doing is you're reducing liquidity, you're showing that this is something you believe in a long-term picture, and you're helping to secure the network. Now, we took that same exact model and we applied that within the smart contract protocol for CityCoins, and it pretty much functions the same way. So when stackers are locking up their tokens, they're giving a signal to the network that this is something they want to hold on to. All right, just coming back to the chat real quick. All right, well, if you have some more questions, keep them coming. I'm happy to answer. All right, so Hector asked, once I have a Hero wallet, how do I mine Miami Coin? Can I do it without creating an account on minemiamicoin.com? Well, this is actually one of the fascinating things about how this technology works is when you have the Hero web wallet and you have an account that you've created, so you have your Stacks address and everything else, that is your account. You're actually not creating an account on minemiamicoin.com or minecitycoins.com or any of these services. You're just simply accessing it. So that's where some of those libraries come into play, like stacks.js and Stacks Connect. They give you the ability to interact and send transactions that you can then sign via the Hero web wallet. And it kind of provides a layer of abstraction on the side of that. So once you have your Hero web wallet, then to mine Miami Coin, you would just visit the website, you would connect your wallet to it, and you'd be able to submit transactions. Now, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things to note, I definitely highly recommend reading the documentation around CityCoins, around mining, to make sure you fully understand it. If you have any questions, there are several community members in the chat, including myself, who are very happy to answer them ahead of time. And do note that when you send stacks to the contract for mining, they are not returned. You are competing to win that block with others, and they follow that same 30% split to the city, 70% split to stackers. Just going to check the Q&A again. All right. Well, if we have any more questions, keep them coming. Now, what I can do while we're waiting too is I can type in some more resources and some links for people to kind of take a look at. So with some of the things that I talked about today, you have the Stacks blockchain. And that is the main blockchain this operates on, the one that connects back to Bitcoin and inherits the security of Bitcoin, which is absolutely fascinating as you dig more into it. You have the CityCoins website. So this is the main sort of marketing site that outlines a little bit about what we're doing as far as the protocol, some of the successes we've had with Miami. And one of the accounts to follow on Twitter would definitely be the Mine CityCoins account. And that's the main one where you'll see different updates and a ton of information, a little bit of back and forth, even with Mayor Suarez. It's been an absolutely beautiful experience so far. And we think we're really unlocking something new here. So, to see what this grows into and what this creates as it exists for much longer is going to be really exciting. All right, so we have a new question in. It says, what are your thoughts on decentralized finance, smart contracts for insurance, etc.? How do you see CityCoins playing into these areas? Very good question. So one of the cool things about being on the Stacks blockchain in particular is when we're talking about decentralized finance or DeFi, we're talking about it being on Bitcoin instead of being on another blockchain or anywhere else. And Bitcoin is a massive untapped potential for this type of thing. And we already see that a small amount of Bitcoin is wrapped and exists on other systems. But why not have it exist in a much closer relationship? And one of the beautiful things about Clarity smart contracts is they can actually be activated by a pure Bitcoin transaction. And we can see that today through some of the technology that's available. There's a tool that we call catamaran swaps, for example. And this allows you to submit a Bitcoin transaction that will allow you to transfer Bitcoin and receive stacks. And it's even been abstracted to the point where you could transfer Bitcoin and make that transaction to receive Miami coin. There's also atomic swaps that exist now between Stacks and Miami coin, and that will be online for future CityCoins as well. And coming back to the question a little bit, I think smart contracts are something fascinating that we're just starting to scratch the surface of. Right now, a lot of these things like insurance, for example, they require a company in the middle. And smart contracts help to remove that middleman and say that this logic will always process the same way that you expect. So when you have things that are traditionally gated by a company, they can actually just run the logic directly on the blockchain. Now, how CityCoins can play into that in particular is also very interesting. As a fungible token on the Stacks blockchain, it can actually interact with smart contracts the same way that you could with the base currency Stacks. And everything could be possible using Stacks, Miami coin, or any other future CityCoin. I think that actually this would be a good time to give a plug to some of the projects in the Stacks ecosystem as well. So with decentralized finance being a very hot topic in the space, there are some really cool things coming online as well. So some of the projects like Arcadico, which is creating a stable coin on Stacks, and it's creating loans that repay themselves through stacking. You have DEXs that are coming online like Swapper and StackSwap, and tons of new technology that are starting to provide these primitives that are going to slowly build what we would call DeFi on Bitcoin. Oh man, and I forgot about one. So in addition to Arcadico, StackSwaps, and some of the other ones I mentioned, there's another really cool project called Alex that's coming out. And the idea here would be that you could create futures based on your stacked funds, let's say Miami coin, for example, and be able to trade them. So even though you have a locked token and that you're doing everything you can to support the network, you would still have the ability to kind of move those around and receive different things. And some other interesting projects that are coming up on Stacks now are based around NFTs. So you can imagine NFTs that are built on Bitcoin, and they can even provide the same sort of stacking process. We see that today with what are called boom boxes. And the idea is that you can lock up a certain amount of stacks related to this NFT. The NFT is what is stacked and locked, but then you can transfer it. And whoever owns that NFT would then be able to collect the earnings from stacking. So a lot of this is still in very early phases, but there's definitely some exciting pieces coming online. All right, looks like we've got about 13 minutes left, but I definitely welcome any additional questions, either if you want to jump up here on stage with me or just share them in the chat or anything else. So Hector, he says, it appears to me that you're not really mining Miami coin. You're just trading stacks for Miami coin. Well, not exactly. So when you look at how the protocol works, miners are competing in a given block. So there's only one winner in that block that is going to mint brand new Miami coin. And that's how the coin comes into existence. So, like I was saying earlier, there's no pre-mine, there's no ICO, there was no pre-sale, nothing like that. Like, it's literally only created through this process of mining. And in competing with other miners, the one winner that's selected per block is selected by a random function that does take in a weighted amount based on how much you contribute against the total that's contributed for that block. But it's really a very similar process to what you see with Stacks. So, when you look at the Stacks blockchain, the same thing is happening with the miners there. Stacks miners are spending Bitcoin, and only one miner is selected per block to create that block and to mint the newly created stacks as well. And that made me think too, another way to sort of generalize that and to give it a better picture is, imagine the electricity and the hardware requirements that go into mining Bitcoin, right? So you have machines that are trying to solve these computationally difficult problems. You're having the electricity spent that's doing that. Instead of trying to go and recreate a proof of work chain, instead, what Stacks aims to do, and what we do as a function of that, is to recycle that proof of work. The electricity's already been spent to create Bitcoin. So using Bitcoin to create stacks and using stacks to create Miami coin, it's sort of recycling that process. All right, so we've got about 10 minutes left. I see we have a new question that popped up. What was your journey into blockchain, and what do you recommend beginners to focus on and look at? Thank you, Richard. That's actually a good question as well. I like getting into this story a little bit. So my background, I've been in IT and networking for about 17 years now, I think it's been. I started right out of high school, well, in high school actually, and absolutely loved the space. I worked with technology. I knew of Bitcoin in the early days, but it was a little beyond me to get involved with mining. And of course, everybody has those moments where they're like, I wish I would have done it sooner, but I knew of it. And I kind of let it go to the side. And it wasn't until I started working with public and private key pairs around like SSH and VPNs that things really started to click for me. So at the end of 2019, I discovered Stacks. And at the time, it was called Blockstack, actually. And how I did that is I was looking for open source software to replace some of the common things that you'd find in small and medium businesses. So I was actually running a consulting company at the time, and I was helping people learn to use open source software instead of their closed source equivalents. And one of the things I was searching for was decentralized accounting. I thought that would be a really interesting market to break into. Everybody tends to use the same software for accounting. I don't have to mention the name of it. I'm sure everybody can imagine what it is. But I wanted to find an alternative. And the one that I came across was actually built on the Stacks 1.0 network. And that's what started me down my journey. As I started reading more about what was going on behind the scenes, I started reading more about how these apps were created. And with that, I made the decision that if I was going to develop something, this was the direction I want to go. I want to be in this space and learn more about what's going on, because Stacks enables some interesting things. You have your decentralized identity that's linked to your public-private key pair. You have decentralized storage, which your individual user data is completely encrypted and only accessible by you. And then you have the other blockchain pieces that we're familiar with, like accounts and being able to move funds. So with those things, I just dove in and started learning as much as possible. And I would recommend the same for anybody else. If you think blockchain is something that you want to start looking at, I definitely say give Stacks a look. It is unique in the sense that things are built on top of Bitcoin. And at the end of the day, we all love Bitcoin, and it's just been an amazing technology that enables so much, but it is limited, as we mentioned earlier, on purpose. So with that, this new layer, this blockchain that connects to Bitcoin, gives you some of the same smart contract functionality, and it's still an emerging ecosystem. So when you look at how the Stacks blockchain works, when you look at how to interact with it with applications, and when you start looking at Clarity as a programming language, you're starting to enter this new sector where you can become an expert in something that not a lot of people know yet. So I see we're entering the last about 6 minutes or so of our time here today, but definitely just want to encourage everybody again, if you'd like to come up on stage with me, we can have a conversation and talk about questions that way. You're also welcome to post anything in the chat or in the Q&A, and I will do my best to answer. All right, looking back through the chat, does Stacks connect to Bitcoin via the Lightning Network? So no, it does not. It is connected one-to-one. The block hash of every Stacks block that's created is recorded in a Bitcoin transaction. But there is some work being done to create a bridge between the Stacks network and the Lightning Network now. And that's one of the projects you can find in the Stacks Discord. Kind of fascinating ideas. All right. Thank you, Hector, for asking questions. Andy, thank you. Yeah, I have to say, like, after getting involved in this ecosystem, I was just absolutely floored by what was possible and how much thought went into this blockchain before it was even created. So, Stacks itself as a concept came to life, I want to say, around 2016. The Stacks 1.0 mainnet was online somewhere around 2018, 2019. And as I mentioned earlier, the Stacks 2.0 mainnet, which is the more recent version and the one that allows a lot of these capabilities that we're talking about, just went live in January of this year. All right, so the next question is said, will I be around on Discord to talk about anything later? And the answer is definitely yes. So you can find me on the ShellHacks Discord. I'm actually going to grab my username right now. And I am also in the CityCoins Discord and the Stacks Discord under the same name. And very happy to just kind of dive into any of these concepts more, or to walk through anything related to these things. I've been a Stacks advocate since I started looking at the chain in early 2020 into 2019. And all of a sudden, I just felt this need to let more people know about this. So it's been a pleasure just to have this opportunity to come online and to talk to people here at ShellHacks. And overall, just happy to dig into any of the concepts further. All right, so we got one more question here in the last few minutes. Do you ever foresee using another coin to mine Miami Coin other than Stacks? So in the current implementation of the protocol, that wouldn't be possible because Stacks is the main thing used to create Miami Coin in this case, and that's how we see future CityCoins operating. But with that being said, there could be other possibilities. Now, depending on what you mean by another coin, it could actually mean a few things. Like when we're talking about Bitcoin or Ethereum or some of what already exists today, cross-chain technology is a little more difficult to look at, and I don't see anything like being able to use ETH to mine Miami Coin, for example. But given that you can create fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens on the Stacks blockchain, there could be a world where other coins that are created on Stacks could be used to follow this same method of proof of transfer and to implement a similar structure on the Stacks blockchain. All right, well, it looks like we're entering the final minute here, so I just want to say thank you to everybody who was able to attend. Thank you to anyone who views the recording afterward. And of course, if you're looking to find out more information, I definitely encourage you to look up Stacks as a blockchain. I encourage you to join the Stacks Discord. You can look up CityCoins as a project and as a protocol, and join the CityCoins Discord as well. And we're all trying to come together as a community here. So really appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone, for the thank yous, and look forward to seeing you. Take care.